tonight's first speaker. Well, we actually have both speakers, Jim Simpson and Phil Haney. Jim's going to come up first. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip his bio. He can give it to you before. And just for my curiosity, who was here last June when Jim was here? Oh, so I would say less than half of the room. So we have a lot of new people hearing Jim for the first time. Good to know. Thank you very much. Jim, come on up.
While we overcome our substantial technical difficulties we're having this evening, we will take this pause for a short commercial announcement. This is my book, The Red-Green Axis, Refugees, Immigration, and the Agenda to Erase America. It's a good book. It's a short book. It's easy to read, and anybody who reads it will become probably more educated than 99% of the people in this country. It's a very good book. It's a very short book. I'll have you know that you can get it at Amazon for $6 plus shipping. And totally ruining my marketing program, the Center for Security Policy will let you download the PDF of this very same book for free. It's a royal pain in the neck when you're trying to sell books, I gotta tell you. And I make it even worse by selling mine for $10. And the reason I do that, well, frankly, to be honest with you, because I want to make money. And there's a lot of really important reasons. Yes, I will sign them for an additional fee. Kidding. But yes, thank you, Mike. But there's a lot of very good reasons to have this book. It makes you instantly knowledgeable, and the most important reason of all, I need the money. And also, my compatriot Phil has his book here, See Something, Say Nothing, which recounts his battle with the bureaucracy, where he was investigated 9 times for identifying terrorists in our nation. It's stunning, the story that he tells in this book. It's simply stunning. And I say you have to have this book. Both excellent reads, both highly recommended, and both you need to purchase because we need the money. And now back to our technical difficulties. Oh, it's here. Oh, all right. Okay, so now I've been told I only have 30 minutes and I have about 100 slides, so I'm going to have to speed through these. All right. So I'm going to focus more on the red. And this is the red. We've got Karl Marx, we've got Vladimir Lenin, and how many people can recognize the name of the person in the middle? Hands? None. Okay. And here's the green. And we call it the green because there's so much green behind the everything the Muslims do, all their flags, a lot of their history. The axis, you have to understand this. You have to take the big picture. Take a look at this from 30,000 feet. The axis is an asymmetric military strategy of conquest of our country. It is a strategy to take over this country without firing a shot. And it has many different facets to it, all of which are at play right before our eyes today. Here's a snapshot of what the Muslim Brotherhood looks like. I did this chart a few years ago. And all those connections, I don't have time to go through them. We spent an hour talking about it, but I can defend every one of those connections. Now, about Sergei. He was 22-year-old anarchist when he wrote something called the Revolutionary Catechism, 1869. Now, I want you to read what he writes in the preamble. Convinced that the people's, that's you and me, happiness can only come about as the result of an all-destroying popular revolt. The Society of Revolutionaries will use all its resources and energy towards increasing and intensifying the evils and miseries of the people until at last their patience is exhausted and they're driven to a general uprising. Doesn't that sound like what's going on today? Well, if you follow through the Antifa groups, the RevCon groups, the Refuse Fascism groups, and everybody else, including the Islamist groups, are all working to build this atmosphere of hatred and division in our society. They're doing that deliberately. The issue is never the issue with the left. The issue is always the revolution. The 60s radicals said that, and it's one of the few times they were really honest. They don't care about what the issue is. They don't care about gay rights. They don't care about civil rights. They don't care about the First Amendment. They don't care about anything except in so much as it can be used as a vehicle to help them obtain power. And they do it by wrapping themselves in the mantle of compassion and thereby grasping the high ground and high rhetorical ground, putting us all on the defensive. See, because once they get up there, if you're against anything, they say, well, then you're a racist, you're a sexist, you're a homophobe, you're an Islamophobe, name your phobe. That's a tactic. It's a tactic. And the pretext is social justice, equity, fairness. You've all heard it, but it's all bogus. They don't want social justice. They don't want equity. They don't want fairness. They want power. Their power to the exclusion of everybody else and their wealth also at everybody else's expense. Here, for example, are a few of those communists who have obtained that power. And my favorite one is Castro's Fisherman's Cottage. That's what he called it, Fisherman's Cottage. And every communist leader is vastly wealthy. The Castro brothers were considered to be the most wealthy people in the world because they own the entire economy of Cuba. And that's the way it is with all of them. And they can do and have whatever they want, and nobody else can say anything because the secret police will come for you if you do. So this whole hate narrative, it has a specific strategic purpose. And Lenin started it by saying, we must write in a language which sows among the masses hate, revulsion, and scorn towards those who disagree with us. So if you disagree, we have to hate you. And in the 40s, they passed around that message. Keep on saying these people are bigots, they're haters, they are anti-Semitic, for the sole purpose of giving us a bad name, discrediting us in the world's eyes. And as you know, you tell a lie and over and over and over and over and over and over, and nobody challenges it, it becomes truth in the public eye. Now, Herbert Marcuse was a communist who came to the United States, and he wrote a very powerful essay in the 1960s called Repressive Toleration, where he argued that because the left didn't have acceptance in this country, that the right had to be completely silenced so that the left could get its voice heard. And he said, not equal, but more representation of the left would be equalizing of the prevailing inequality. That's their twisted mind thing. And then Saul Alinsky put it all in practice with the rules for radicals. Now, look, here is a law that gives the President of the United States absolute, unquestionable authority to omit from this country anybody that he deems at all a danger. He has complete discretion. That's in the law. And you saw how Obama appointed judges, and actually one Bush appointed judge beyond me, opposed those bans, and they've opposed the latest one as well. They have no authority to do that. They're basically acting like executives. But they're challenging him because if he ignores them, then all the voices in the Congress will demand impeachment. That's the game. And so now we have, here's a Islamist, here's a communist, works for the International Office of Migration. She is one of their spokespeople. How do you like that? Workers' World Party, Fight for Socialism. Yeah. And here's Nihad Awad. Black Lives Matter is our matter. He's the director of CARE. Here's another person from Muslim Brotherhood Front Group, the Muslim American Society. Now look what she says here. We are the community that staged a revolution across the world. If we could do that, why can't we have that revolution in America? She said that at a Islamic Society of North America 2015 conference. And here we have, this shows you just a snapshot of the depth of the penetration. And I have typed out what he said here to these CARE people. CARE, the moderate Muslim, is our most effective weapon. CARE people are not moderate Muslims. They have been designated a terrorist group by the United Arab Emirates. They are an unindicted co-conspirator in the Holy Land Foundation trial. And the only reason they weren't indicted was because Obama was elected before they could get to that point. And he shut down the entire investigation. And now the statute of limitations has run out. So here's just a few pictures that kind of back up what I've been saying. All of it, the monument issue, all the same thing, all trying to provoke, all trying to sow division. Okay, Cleveland last summer. And here's Nihad Awad in front of the White House bragging about his protest. And he's supposed to be the moderate Muslim. Oh, well, I just thought I'd throw that in for a brief interlude. We got to laugh. I mean, we really do have to laugh, you know? So the refugee resettlement program was actually first conceived at the Conference on Human Settlements in 1976 by the United Nations. And it didn't talk about saving all the refugees. It talked about redistributing people, resources, and land throughout the world because, of course, some people were unfortunate where they wound up living. So it's not fair that, for example, Somalis get to live in a desert wasteland and we get to live in this verdant countryside. So, of course, there has to be population redistribution. That's their argument. The UN is entirely socialist, has been from day one. Another goal was to abolish private property because private property stands in the way of doing everything they want. And population control. Population control. And we all listen. We have reduced our replacement rates to essentially zero. And that's what the entire West has done. We were good boys and girls and paid attention and did what the nice UN told us to do. And we reduced our population to barely replacement rates. In some countries, it's below replacement rates. And then the UN said, you idiots, what do you do that for? Now you're going to have to get replacement migration to get people, young people in to take the place of all the people that you don't have to fill those jobs. That's the game. It's a complete fraud. It's a complete lie. It's a complete put down. It's a complete game they play against us. And it's very malicious, very malevolent, and its goal is, as with everything else, to subvert, undermine this country until we finally collapse. Second largest organization in the world is Islamic Organization of Land Cooperation, big influence in the UN. UN selects most of our refugees. That's just a quick rundown of the refugee program, but I don't have time, so I'm going to have to just bounce through all this. It's dangerous, secretive, costly, and unfair. Well, we know about it being unfair, but this is what Khalid Sheikh Mohammed said to say about it. You know, he was the brainchild of 9/11. Said the brothers would relentlessly continue their attacks, and the American people would eventually become so tired, so frightened, they would just want it to end. Doesn't that sound a lot like Nechayev? Isn't that interesting, huh? Eventually, America will expose her neck for us to slaughter. Jihad-minded brothers would immigrate into the United States. So here's a snapshot of ISIS investigation in the United States so far. And it's not August, it's to September. I didn't have time to fix that. That's just a snapshot of all the various terrorists. Over 300 refugees. Now, Obama wouldn't tell us that. As soon as Jeff Sessions took the Department of Justice, and when Trump was in, he opened up the records and he found that over 300 refugees have been involved in terrorist investigations. Obama claimed none. All the refugee contractors said, oh, no, they're all nice people. They never do that. It's a lie. And when it comes to creating chaos and building this atmosphere of anarchy, all of those events, Fort Lauderdale was a Muslim terrorist. Alexandria was that radical left-wing guy who shot the congressman. Las Vegas, we don't really know what that was, although Pollock's girlfriend is supposed to have been a rabid anti-Trumper. But the fact that we don't know, to me, says loads. It says that the media is not telling us. Why is the media not telling us? If it was a conservative or was somebody that favored their narrative, they'd be all over the paper about it. They're not saying a thing. So I think it is the reality that he was another Antifa type, but I think he was a deep agent kind of Antifa type, not just a typical lunatic, because his whole life was secret. So we don't know about that. But even if he was just a lunatic, all of the stuff that's going around today, all of the insanity, all of the hypertension that they've created, guarantees more things like that just from the people that are on the edge. And we can put it all at their feet because they've created this atmosphere on purpose. That's a snapshot of what refugees get when they get here. Refugees take jobs Americans won't. Well, sure they do, but they can take welfare while they're at it. And so it winds up not really just being a subsidy for business. And despite getting all these benefits, refugees use welfare at rates that are off the charts compared to Americans. And you can see just over those 5 years and longer than that, going all the way back to the first refugees in 1980, you can compare their rates, even the ones that were here from 80 to 89 with US born, they're still higher after 40 years. That's a back of the envelope cost estimate of what the welfare costs of the refugees have been from 2009 to 2014. Could be higher than that, it could be lower than that. There are a lot of different variables that go into it. There's all kinds of refugee problems. A big one is the languages. You know, little communities throughout the United States are becoming towers of Babel, where there's people speaking dozens of languages in schools and nobody understands what's going on. The school ratings have dropped enormously and the costs have gone up to teach these people English. A lot of refugees come here with TB. 88% of people with multi-drug resistant TB, active cases, are foreign born, 88%. And Obama was nice about lifting the ban on HIV immigrants in 2010, and that's a CDC estimate of how many come per year and the cost. And here's a snapshot of what it looks like from 2003. And the reason I chose 2003 is because that's when the Unaccompanied Alien Children Program was transferred to the Department of Health and Human Services. It had been in DHS earlier than that, or not DHS, yeah, DHS and Immigration Service before that. The red numbers are estimates, and it's important to note here, look at 2017 and 2018, the total column on the right-hand side. In 2016, the numbers are very high. 2017, they're lower, and 2018, and those are my estimates, but they're a lot lower, and they're based on what we've seen so far. Why do you think that is? And here's another little factoid. Here's the resettlement program, 15, 16, 17. If you look at the total in the bottom, it went up from 2 billion, 2.6 billion in 2017. 2018, the Trump proposed budget is less than 2015. 28% reduction. That's what he promised, and that's what he delivered. At least that's what he's proposed. Now, it's going to go to Congress next. All bets are off. But the point is, while we're all worried about everything and while we're all upset about things that aren't happening, quietly, unbeknownst to a lot of people, he's doing a lot of things. And I'm going to get into that a little bit more here. But a big issue here, this is the refugee resettlement program. It's not just refugees. It's asylum seekers, it's SIVs, special immigrant visas, it's the Cuban Haitian entrant program, it's asylum seekers, trafficking victims, and unaccompanied alien minors. It's a huge program, huge. And if you look at this here, the HHS, Office of Refugee Resettlement, the Unaccompanied Alien Children Program pays out more than the refugee program. In other words, we're paying more out to handle refugees through illegal aliens through the HHS than we are for refugees. And then we have families of asylum seekers, 10 to 15,000 a year. Families that come with these supposedly unaccompanied alien children, who weren't really unaccompanied, about 50,000 a year. Temporary protected status, there's 325,000 people in this country, including many Syrians. Most people don't know that we worried about bringing in 10,000 Syrians. There were 100,000 Syrians here from 2012 that came in through non-immigrant visas, 100,000. The diversity visa program, another little one that you've never heard of. Trump is proposed abolishing it. Great idea. And humanitarian parole, we have no idea how many people they bring in. This is a snapshot of the voluntary agencies, the nonprofit, I should say nonprofit, the tax-exempt private contractors paid by the federal government, by the head, to resettle refugees. And you can see immediately, by the head, what does that mean? It means incentives to bring in more, doesn't it? They survive based on how many refugees they are able to resettle. So it's not surprising that even though it's illegal for them to go out and advocate for their program, they are in the streets nonetheless demanding Trump get rid of the immigration ban, demanding more refugees. They're all leftists, by the way, so we're paying them hundreds of millions of dollars to go out and agitate on behalf of refugees at our expense. And the illegal alien youth program is huge. And refugees get all kinds of special grants. As I say, and normally I'd go into it, but I don't have time now. And then the refugee resettlement contractors and all the 320 subcontractors that help them, and then the thousands of nonprofits that help them get money from Ford Foundation, which has net assets 12 billion. Soros had 6 billion. Now it has 24 billion because he just added 18 billion of his own personal fortune. Kaplan, that's Welch's grape juice. You never know these things. Z. Smith Reynolds Tobacco, Starbucks, Tides Foundation, and many others. Most people don't know that the left cries poverty. The left and foundations alone have about $150 billion to fight against us. We have not even 1/10 that amount. So you know how they cry about the Koch brothers. And the Koch brothers aren't even conservative. They're just sort of libertarian. Occasionally they do what we like. But they're puny. They toss in maybe 10 or 20 million against 150 billion. Okay, so what has he done? Well, he's reduced the refugee caps to 45,000. Now, we all asked for 0. That's what we wanted. We wanted a moratorium on the whole program so that they could fix the vetting process and really, I'd say, abolish the entire program because it's dangerous, costly, all the things I said before. And it generates its own incentives to bring in ever more refugees. And it is a cornerstone of the red-green axis strategy because it brings in people from hundreds of other cultures. And not only does it create a situation where we're putting many, many cultures that don't get along together to try to get along, it dilutes our culture. And it brings in more and more people, the equivalent of a city every year, to dilute our power and influence, both in the voting box and in our national character. The fewer people that understand who we are, where we came from, what we're about, what our purpose is, our constitution-based republic, we cease to exist. And that's why they're just fanatically defending this program, fanatically defending open borders, because they want this country, as it stands, like I say, to disappear. It's the agenda to erase America. That's what it is. So he reduced the refugee caps. It wasn't what we wanted, but I've got to tell you, I know from inside the Beltway, I know from very good sources that it was an extremely difficult fight, and the White House actually outmaneuvered the State Department swamp in getting those reductions. The State Department wanted to bring it back up to 70,000, which it's been historically for the last 10 years. So that was one minor victory. He reduced the budget, as I pointed out. He's enforcing border laws, and what is that doing to the number of unaccompanied alien children, the number of illegal aliens generally coming across the border? It's bringing them down substantially. Also, he's tightening up the asylum program. The asylum program is just fraught with fraud. And you can see, if you go back here, if you look at the asylum program, it says asylees down there, it was up to 31,000 in 2015. And there's hundreds of thousands waiting for a decision. And while they're waiting for the decision, they get to be in the United States. Some have been waiting here for years. We don't really know who these people are. But whereas Obama would just get them to court, sign them off, and let them go most of the time, Trump is tightening that up substantially. So while that might not affect the people here awaiting, well, it will affect them because a lot of them will be thrown out, but it will also discourage many who would try to get in on that basis committing fraud. So it's going to reduce the asylum numbers. So that's one of those little known things. He's suspending the family reunification program. You know, once you get a person here, a refugee here, the refugee contractors say, bring in your whole family. And so they invite all their family in. And guess what? A lot of them really aren't family. You know, in the Muslim countries, they're maybe wife number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, can count whatever. And their children and their parents, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The Somali program was suspended for 3 years, even during the Obama administration, because they couldn't figure out who 80% of these family people were supposed to be. 80% fraud. So he's trying to suspend that. And this is interesting, enhanced vetting for female refugees. Now, why do you think that would matter? Well, that's one reason. Well, that's another reason, apparently. What's another reason? Well, right. That's another reason. And another reason is it makes it that much more unappealing for a refugee to come here and then say, well, I'll bring my wife later. His wife can't come, why would he come? Maybe he might not. Of course, maybe he might say, well, I'll get another wife. You know, who knows? Never know with these folks. But I think that has a lot of ramifications. And female refugees get no oversight. That's another issue. You know, so as we saw with what's his name's wife, the San Bernardino bombers, killer's wife, she didn't get any oversight. Well, she should have. And the latest ban suspends indefinitely travel from Syria, Somalia, Iran, and 3 other terrorist nations. That's great. Plus North Korea and Venezuela, which are also terrorist nations, although not a lot of people that come here. It's a great, because it essentially is the ban that we wanted. These are the worst of the worst. We wanted them not to come, and that ban does it. Now, of course, another judge has blocked it, but he doesn't have a leg to stand on legally, and the Supreme Court will throw it out. It's just the trouble is that it's going to take time. and he's proposed ending the diversity visa. So these are a bunch of good things that he's done on this program specifically in an atmosphere where doing anything causes nationwide riots. So I think, you know, we have to look at it, stand back a little bit, look at it from that perspective and take some heart in the fact that he's thinking and he's trying to do things. He's trying to do things that he can't do either legislatively because the members of Congress are a bunch of cowards, or because he just can't get it through. He's trying to do it with regulation, with the phone and the pen thing, just like he did with Obamacare, which was beautiful, brilliant, brilliant. Let me talk later. He doesn't. That was a ruling he has no authority to make. He was basically deigning himself to be the executive of the first executive of the United States. He's not. He's not the commander in chief. Well, I would say yes. I would say yes. But the danger is if he does, I think that's half the reason. They're trolling for bait for him to jump on, hoping that he'll do something that they can then say is an impeachable offense. And even if they don't get it, they will scream for it. They're looking for a pretext. And plus, Trump is trying to do things constitutionally, which we should be all happy about, trying to restore respect for the Constitution. So, what have we done? Well, all of us here are testimony that we've defied the swamp and we continue to do so. I'm happy about that. We have raised public awareness of the refugee issue. Phil, I, Ann Corcoran, other people like us, all you folks have raised awareness over these past 2 years about what this refugee resettlement program is and how dangerous it is. Without you all, 31 governors wouldn't have opposed the Syrian refugee resettlement. That wouldn't have been a campaign issue. So we have to take credit for these things. This March, my friends in Rutland, Vermont, defeated a 5-term mayor who had attempted to open a refugee program without asking anybody's permission. We absolutely kicked his ass, excuse the language. And unbeknownst, again, to a lot of you folks, all we hear about is the bad appointments that get in to the White House and to the agencies. You don't know, but we know, Phil and I know, about the bad appointments that we have worked to make sure don't become members of this administration. A big one is the person that I said earlier with Michael McCall. He's the head of the House Homeland Security Committee, and he was up to be considered for Secretary of Department of Homeland Security. He's a care tool, and he's an open borders fool who lies about things and says he's going to do one thing and does another, which unfortunately is all too typical. We got him defeated. He's not going to be DHS Secretary, and that is a very good thing. We're conducting law enforcement training. Why we, I don't say me, I say we, generally speaking. David Borges, you guys have to get to know him. He doesn't charge a thing for it, except for his expenses. He's a former chief of police in Georgia, and so he, for that reason, he has a lot of credibility with local police, and he is a powerful program of instructing police about the dangers of Sharia and refugee resettlement. We have John Guandolo, of course, I think most of you know, former FBI agent. Claire Lopez, former intelligence agent. What should we do? What should we do? Well, we've done a bunch of stuff, but we got to keep doing stuff. And you always ask me, what should we do? Number one, we are against a major force here. We are against powers and principalities. We are against the forces of evil like we never have been. And for my money, we have too much as a nation, although I'm probably talking to the wrong people. But as a nation, as a whole, we have abandoned God. And we are paying the price for that. We are paying the price for that. You know what they say, you can't fool an honest man? Well, you do as they did in Judges and do everything that's right in the sight of your own eyes, and you get what you deserve. And this, unfortunately, what's happened to us. So I ask all of you, I pray every day for our country. And I ask all of you to do the same thing. And we can pray specifically. God will hear us. We need to elect strong leaders. And I think that's starting to happen. The general population is getting it. That even if you get a Republican in there, 9 times out of 10, they turn squishy and, they become nobodies. We got to restore our constitutional principles, our sovereignty. We have to defend our rights in public and private. That means we have to confront these people. We have to say, you can't just get away with saying that. We can't be silent anymore. And Sharia Crime Stoppers, I can tell you about that, not now, but afterwards if you want, I can get you information about that. We need to designate the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization. Trump administration, because of the swamp critters in it, have not done so far, but we're trying to do that. And we need to promote various legislations, the Refugee Absorptive Capacity Act, American Laws for American Courts, female genital mutilation, I have that acronym backwards, and many others. Thank you, folks. Buy my book.
Thank you, Jim. Okay, our next speaker is his partner, Phil Haney, who was here last August. And I would like to again see the show of hands. Who has seen Phil before? Okay, about half the room this time, so a bit more. Jim mentioned briefly about Sharia Crime Stoppers, that training program with the gentleman from Georgia. I think it's from Georgia or Alabama. Georgia, yeah. Anyway, so he's involved with somebody from Michigan by the name of Dick Manasari, who will be talking about this at our January meeting. So if you're in law enforcement, Mr. Zundrowski, Mr. Borsch, I know you're here. I'd like to talk to you afterwards at the end of the meeting, if we can, about this. So something we want to kick off in Cleveland. But anyway, here's our friend Phil Haney.
Hi, everybody. Stretch out a little bit. We're doing good. I'm going to review some of the new things. I'm going to take you fast forward into what's happening on a global level. And don't worry about missing it too much, because I'll give the PowerPoint to Dan and you can send it out to everybody. There's a lot of important information coming up that's going to have an effect on our national security, both in the domestic arena here at home and in the international arena. And of course, everything's interactive, so that nothing is isolated. It's all tangled together in a big ball of string. So as soon as the PowerPoint comes up, it's called Eliminating the Gray. The reason why I'm using that title is that's a jihadi term. What they're seeking to do globally is eliminate the gray areas. And so how are they going to eliminate the gray area? They're going to push their ideology into regions where it's never been, kind of like water under pressure. You know, you think of a sponge floating on water. What's the natural thing that the water is going to do with the sponge? Soak into it, right? Saturate it. If you're not happy with the rate of absorption of the water, what are you going to do? You're going to push on it from above, and that's terrorism. But the strategy is the same. The goal is the same, to saturate that sponge. So the bottom line question is, how do you insulate, how do you waterproof the sponge from being saturated, with the caveat that you can't take the sponge out of the water? And of course, we're the sponge. How do you waterproof the sponge? It's called the Constitution. It's the best waterproofing there is, because it's a document that describes our sovereignty. That's what the Constitution is really all about, is a description of the sovereignty that it was endowed to us by our Creator. The unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are our endowed sovereignty. And both the green and the red, who are seeking to undermine that, are trying to replace the sovereignty with their own idea of what a government should be, not of, for, and by the people, but by a small group who dictate to the rest of us how we should live. This is it. This is the title, Eliminating the Gray. And why I put that slide right there is that's Hamas. Very pleasant looking fellows, if you didn't know they were Hamas, correct? And where do you suppose they are? There's a clue to where they are in the picture in the background. They're in Iran. Our supposed friends who are going to restrain themselves from developing a nuclear bomb, right? Because we asked them to and we paid them not to do it, right? Iran is hosting Hamas, but not just Iran, so are other Sunni countries around the world. And this, my friends, is the face of evil in suit and tie. And it's eliminating the gray. Again, that's a jihadi term, and that's what they intend to do around the world, is push their influence like water under pressure, like saturation of the sponge. And the best way that we can prevent that saturation is to recognize that it's our sovereignty that's under assault. Sovereignty is supreme power or authority, and the authority of a state to govern itself by or another state. We have been endowed with unalienable rights by our Creator, and the Creator instituted government among men to preserve the very liberties that He endowed us with. We're the only country in the world that specifically states that our rights come from the Creator above. And that's sovereignty. It's more fundamental than the Constitution, and it's way more fundamental than a wall built around the border of our city or of our country. Because if we have a 40-foot thick wall and we don't understand what our sovereignty is, we will still lose. And the threat is not that some great shredder in the sky will devour the Constitution, or that it'll be erased off the blackboard when we wake up tomorrow morning. The threat is that not enough people in the country will recognize that the Constitution is worth defending. And when that critical mass comes, then we will fall. So that's the responsibility of everyone here, is to simply pass on to the next generations and everybody that you meet the simple act, the simple discipline of attaching everything that you do from now on, and I mean that literally, going forward, from today forward, attach whatever position you take to a constitutional principle. Be able to literally cite it for chapter and verse. Why is Sharia law illegal in the United States? All the debate we have about freedom of religion, freedom of expression, there's a fundamental clause in the Constitution that makes Sharia law completely illegal. Can somebody tell me the place in the Constitution where that is written? No, that's First Amendment. First Amendment. What's the second word of First Amendment? Amendment. What's it an amendment to? What is the First Amendment amending? The fundamental Constitution. That means that it can never supersede the foundational clauses in the Constitution. And the fundamental clause in the Constitution that makes Sharia law illegal is Article 6. That the U.S. Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and that the judges of each state will be bound thereby. A very simple provision. Are we seeing examples today of judges who are not being bound by the Constitution? We absolutely are. We are descending into chaos and anarchy when we have the answer to the problem standing literally right in front of us. But we have lost our grip, like losing your grip on the steering wheel of the Constitution that guides us down the road. And even if we build a wall all the way around the country and we don't recognize the nature of sovereignty and the Constitution, we will still fail, because that sponge is going to get saturated if we don't wake up. However, if we do, and we can spray the waterproofing of the Constitution into the sponge, then no power can prevail against us, because when we recognize the sovereignty that the Creator endowed us with, we become immovable. And we also become capable of recognizing the true nature of threat. This is Abraham Lincoln, and he basically said that we must disenthrall ourselves, and then we shall save our country, the last best hope on earth. What are we enthralled by? What do we need to be disenthralled by? Why don't we all become partisans? And I don't mean political partisans like Democrats or Republicans. I'm talking about constitutional partisan. Is there any reason why anybody could fault us for becoming partisans of the Constitution? Do you know what a paladin is? Paladin, have gun, will travel. Let's become paladin. Paladin means a trusted military officer. Let's put that, instead of the gun in the holster, let's put the Constitution in our pocket and become paladins of the Constitution. Partisans, all of us can be. That means everybody here in this room has a responsibility and a role that they can play. We must graduate from the thought that there's nothing that we can do. There's plenty that each one of you can do, each one of us can do. From this day forward, the 23rd of October, 2017, somewhere in the region of Cleveland, Ohio, I'm giving you a challenge. I'd like to come back here in a year and ask 5 or 10 or 20 of you. I won't even talk. I'll let you tell me the stories of what you did in the last year, to apprehend what we were apprehended for and get a grip on that steering wheel, the Constitution, and begin to regain the territory that we have ceded to our adversaries. Does that sound like a good proposal? This is one of our adversaries, and we're flying. By the way, what time is it right now, literally on the clock? So we're starting to go behind, so I'm not going to go too fast, but is that an ominous looking symbol or not? And down here on the bottom, those yellow words in Arabic is wayauda. It means prepare to terrify your enemies and slaughter them. This is the symbol of the Muslim Brotherhood, the so-called moderate organization that my former chief executive, Obama, made a formal political alliance with and would have put me in jail for simply doing the job that I stood up and took the oath for, which was to target those individuals and keep them from ever having any influence in either the social or the political or the law enforcement arena of our country. That's what I got in trouble for. Those people right there. Why do you suppose they have two swords? Enforcement of Sharia law internally and promotion of Sharia law externally by the sword. Do you see an olive branch there? No. Do you see any exclusion zones there? When North America comes around, are we excluded from the influence, the malevolent gravitational force of the power of this symbol? No. And that, by the way, is the Quran. And how do you know that? How can you, what is a plausible reason of identifying that book as the Quran? Yeah, it reads from right to left. So nothing in this symbol is accidental. This is a picture of, that word in Arabic is Hamas. That's in the West Bank. And I like this picture because that mystery of that, who is that person behind the black veil? She looks like a black hole in space, doesn't she? You don't know who she is. And that is basically the symbol, the camouflage, the subtlety of the nature of the threat we face, standing right in front of us, but there's no way that we can identify him except for the giveaway clue of the word Hamas right behind her. Care. Jim talked about this already. There's no reason on God's green earth that this organization should be allowed to parade itself through the capitals of states and the U.S. Capitol in Washington, D.C., when we've already known for 10 years that they're irrevocably and irrefutably tied to support of Hamas. There's no debate about it. So why are they being allowed to parade themselves and strut around like barnyard roosters in the capitals of our states and country as though they have preeminent authority? It's because it was given to them by the previous administration, openly and blatantly. And now they're rubbing our faces in it. It's called supremacy. It's like the bully on the barnyard, in the schoolyard. I lost my clickability. I've been paralyzed. There we go. I'd like to give you some homework assignments. Again, don't be nervous about missing it. You can get the PowerPoint. And all the URLs are down in the notes sections of each slide. I wrote this on the January 22nd, is it 2nd or 3rd of this year, 2 days after President Trump was inaugurated, and it is a 14-paragraph walkthrough of a fatwa that the Assembly of Muslim Jurists of America issued calling the election of Donald Trump a calamity, which in Arabic to English means a very, very serious offense. And they wrote in very plain English exactly what their strategic and tactical goal is vis-a-vis the election of Trump. And we're seeing it unfold day by day right in front of us. The Assembly of Muslim Jurists of America doesn't sound too terrible in English. But in Arabic, it's Majama Fuqaha al-Sharia bi-Amrikia. You heard the last two words, didn't you? Al-Sharia bi-Amrikia. They're openly promoting Sharia law right here in the United States in direct violation of Article 6 of the Constitution. This, my friends, is the most dangerous Muslim Brotherhood organization in the entire country. And most of us have never heard of it. Assembly of Muslim Jurists of America. Go ahead and look it up and read through it. It's not light reading, because I pulled 32 verses from the Quran out of the English, camouflaged, if you will, and laid it out step by step. And this is Linda Sarsour. She gave a speech at the ISNA this year, and I did the same thing with her. I listened to her speech 50 times. And because I did not want to be accused of misquoting anything that she said, so I made double darn sure that everything that I wrote about her was an absolute verbatim quotation from her, and walked through all of her speech and pulled the Quranic and the Hadith and all of the other Islamic sources and attached them to her speech to the ISNA. This is the one where she called for jihad against President Trump. And that really wasn't even actually the worst thing that she said. This is all new stuff, well past when I published the book. This is all within months old. So this is what's happening. The forces of gravity that are affecting the solar system that we live in. I'm showing them to you now. And these are all attacks on our sovereignty, plain and simple. This is Linda Sarsour. With the guy in the middle is Nihad Awad. He is the president of CARE. He's a known Hamas operative. We've known him for 25 years. And he's still walking around in broad daylight. And the guy on the right is Yasser Qadi, and he's the one that's connected to the San Bernardino Mosque that I've talked about with Tablighi Jamaat. The other group that I worked on when I was a law enforcement officer, the two groups that got me in the most trouble, almost put me in jail, are standing right there with Linda Sarsour. The Orlando attack and the Muslim Brotherhood right there in real life. And this is only, what, June? A couple months ago. Here she is with the pending Democratic nominee for the governorship of Michigan. Right there, guys. Known affiliate of terrorism, hobnobbing with a possible candidate for governor of Michigan. This is where we've come to. This is the new generation, people, right here. And if we stand still because we're older and we don't think we have the energy, then kids like this are going to run right over the top of us. But what we lack in youthful ability, they lack in wisdom. And which one do you think can prevail in the long run, wisdom or strength? Wisdom always will prevail over strength. This is something I would like you to look up. See the title? Half of prominent jihadis tied to nonviolent Islamism, new study shows. Guess who the group that is the core of the uranium atom of this radicalization that they're referring to here? Would you like to venture a guess what group it is? Muslim Brotherhood, operating in the UK and globally, is behind all of the radicalization and moving forward into what is called Salafi Islam, which means original, not radical. Salafi doesn't mean radical. It means going back to the original form of Islam. Here is the study, Milestones to Militancy. It gives you a step-by-step process. And this is done, by the way, by, I can't read it even with my glasses on, Tony Blair's Institute. He's not known as a conservative. He's to the left. when it gets to the point that even left-leaning organizations have come to the inescapable conclusion that the radicalization process is not like getting hit by meteors out of space, just some random unfortunate thing, but is actually being driven by a gravitational force emanating out of the core of the Muslim Brotherhood structure, then you know that we have really come to a turning point in history, and that they themselves recognizes. Do you know what this word is? Anyone here? Jihad. That's how you say it in Arabic. And that's another study. Most UK jihadists tied to nonviolent. Why is this important? What was countering violent extremism all about? Countering violent extremism attempted to disconnect the ideology of Islam with terrorism. And then if we would do that, we would end the terrorist problem. When this tells you they came to the inescapable conclusion that it was exactly the opposite. That people are part of networks. Any of you that have heard me talk in the media will always hear me talk about individuals and organizations, right? This is a perfect proof of it. The individuals become part of a social network, and as they're drawn into the gravitational influence of that network, they become more and more like the founder of Islam himself, Muhammad. And what do I always say about the ants? Follow the trail, find the nest. This is a perfect proof of that. You know that I was an entomologist, right? My first career, I was a founding member of the Nerd Club. We patented the clipboard, the white lab coat, the pen holder, and the glasses. We got patents on all of them. Entomologists of the nerds of all nerds, simply because there's more detail, more fine points about the little insects and agriculture than any other group of living organisms. So if you're a good one, you have to be really pay close attention to detail, and you're a careful observer of behavior. Does that sound like counterterrorism? Attention to detail and close attention to behavior. Individuals, organizations, there's always a connection, and there will be, for example, with the Las Vegas shooting. Eventually, we will find out that this individual was connected in some way to some kind of a network, because we're social creatures. We don't operate in vacuum. We can't. It's virtually impossible to do it. Plus, we don't want to. And with Islam, their worldview, it's anathema. It's completely terrifying to even consider being separated from the global community, which, by the way, is called Ummah in Arabic, which means mother. It's more terrifying for a Muslim to be separated from the community than it is for a little child to be separated from his mother. And so this concept of lone wolf and all this random acts of violence that we heard is a complete false narrative. And this study, thanks to them, proves the point. Here's the other one for Caliph and Country, exploring how British jihadis join a global movement. Global movement organization. Individuals, organizations. And all of this is designed to undermine the sovereignty of these countries around the world where these individuals are operating in many places, in many cases, right out in the open, like here. So you can download these reports and read through them. Now this here is Obama's hidden Iran deal giveaway. What he did is he deleted the information that officers in that part of the government were doing, just like what I was doing in Customs and Border Protection, the Tablighi Jamaat and the Muslim Brotherhood. In order to make the Iran deal go through, he simply eliminated all the derogatory information that these guys had worked on for their whole career in one fell swoop. It wasn't just me. It just so happened that I was one of the very first ones that saw it happen, simply because I was part of the agency that was created to defend our country from threat, both foreign and domestic, Department of Homeland Security, Customs and Border Protection. I was on the front of the front line. And so when the waves started hitting us, people like myself were the very first ones to get hit. And the U.S. government had to make a choice whether they were going to take this derogatory information and act on it from a law enforcement perspective, or whether they were going to eliminate it. So what did they choose to do? Eliminate it. But I can tell you there's a rosy side to the story. I'm like the Terminator. I have extensive files. I kept all of it, 42,000 files. See, it's a bad combination if you're a bad guy to put a nerd and a cop with a gun together. Because I use the qualities that I learned in my scientific training to go after terrorists. And I had a gift for it from the Lord above. And he enabled me to see into the future, if you will, and I became a harbinger. I talked about things 10 years ago that are happening now. And now I'm telling you in a declarative fashion, a fact-based statement. You can write it down or record me on your cell phone. If we don't remedy this, it's inevitable, like adding variables to a mathematical equation, that we're going to have more attacks in the future. And eventually the point is going to come when the American people are sick of hearing their elected officials say there was nothing that we could do and we didn't know. They do know. And I went to my 56th visit to Congress about 2 weeks ago and talked to Steve King from Iowa about the Tablighi Jamaat case, i.e. San Bernardino. And if he follows through, we're going to actually have what they call informal hearings on the Hill, and we're going to actually push this thing out into the open. One more time. "45 national security experts urge President Trump to withdraw from deal with Iran. By favor, I am one of those that signed. This letter is going to be framed in the Hall of History. It will be. The letter of opposition to the Iran deal by 45 subject matter experts in national security. As you walk down the long hall of history into eternity, this letter will be framed somewhere on one of the walls, because this was a point in history. Now, why is all that important? Because remember I showed you already earlier the picture eliminating the gray? This is Hamas in Iran. How many days ago? Yesterday. This is real time, friends. These trees are bearing fruit, bitter fruit, that have been planted in the last few generations, to the point now where you're starting to see bushels of apples or bitter fruit being gathered off of them. So Hamas is tying in with Iran. Basically what they did in simple terms is they went to Iran and said, here we are. We're on the front lines with your greatest enemy, Israel. Sign us up. We'll do whatever you ask us to do. Here's Tillerson signing an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, with the government of Qatar to help increase terrorism, fight against terrorism financing. The only problem with that is that he undercut the efforts of the neighboring states to push Qatar away from their affiliation with, you guessed it, the Muslim Brotherhood. And he did not consult with the other states. He went on and packed these guys on the back, signed the Memorandum of Understanding, and completely undercut the momentum that the other states had gained. He betrayed our own allies in the Middle East. How do you think they see us when we keep doing these kind of things over and over again? By the way, the propaganda that you saw about Qatar Airlines is in response to the effort of the other Gulf states to isolate them. They put an embargo on Qatar. So Qatar comes out with this nice British accent commercial about how wonderful it is to allow people to travel, because they're being embargoed by their neighbors in the Gulf states because of their affiliation with the Muslim Brotherhood. That's what's really behind it. Now you see how ugly and cynical propaganda can actually be, don't you? All that pretty pictures of the nice places in the world and the airplane flying through the air, it's all deception. Here's a more recent thing. Tillerson rejected the Kurdistan independence referendum. Why do you suppose he did that? I'll give you a clue. There's only one other country on the face of the earth that openly endorsed the effort of the Kurds to gain autonomy. Would someone like to guess who that country was? That's right. You guys are good. So, since Israel openly declared its alliance with the Kurdish people, the rest of the countries in the Middle East certainly can't have that. So they put pressure on the U.S. State Department to denounce the best other ally that we have. We betrayed the entire Kurdish people. When all we talk about is democracy and freedom and independence, right? When they actually took the step forward, we betrayed them. Because our supposed friends and allies, like Iran and whoever else you want to name, didn't want Israel to have any more influence in that part of the world. So we sabotaged them for the sake of a false peace. And now Iran is invading Kurdistan from the east as we speak, and Iran is coming up from the south, and they're killing them now. The very people that helped us the most are being killed by Iraqis and Iranians right now. Well, I don't know. I doubt it. I'm sure he has a lot of geniuses that advise him. But it's the same geniuses that have been advising in the Middle East for the last 2 or 3 generations that keep getting us further and further and further into trouble. Good question. Yeah, I know he learns fast, but I can't explain some of the choices that he's made. Like I said, it's a nasty tangled ball of string. And now that you know this kind of information, real-time stuff, again, what are we talking about? What's the foundational bedrock? Constitution, one level underneath that, sovereignty. We denied the Kurdish people the right of sovereignty because of the influence and the opinions of other countries that we're supposedly allied with. We sacrificed their effort for to secure some sort of false peace, which will come back and bite us. Well, what can Israel say? They already made their declaration that they supported them. They can't contradict the United States and Tillerson. They can't stop him. There's probably back channels ways that they can help, but in the macro political arena like this, Tillerson did the same thing to Israel vis-a-vis Kurdistan that he did to the rest of the Gulf states vis-a-vis Qatar with that MOU. He signed away their ability to influence their neighbor. And this is Al-Qaeda, by the way. Did you know that it's actually the original Al-Qaeda is 5 different individuals and 12 different affiliated organizations, which over time gained other members? Those ones right there. That's the first Al-Qaeda, which was, as we think of, was Osama bin Laden. 5 people, 12 organizations. Then comes the next one. This is ISIS. ISIS is 10 times bigger than the original Al-Qaeda. It's got 35 different affiliates around the country. Around the world. And it's popping up like mushrooms in different countries daily as we speak. But there's a third group. And this is the most important thing I want to tell you tonight, perhaps. There's an Al-Qaeda 3. It's called Al-Qaeda of the Indian subcontinent. It coalesced in 2014, but you haven't heard much about it until quite recently. Al-Qaeda of the Indian subcontinent merges together all of the jihad parties from Afghanistan, which borders on Iran, by the way, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and Myanmar. Have we been hearing a little bit about Myanmar lately and Rohingyas? Rohingyas are Muslims who are seeking to subvert the government of Myanmar, just like they do in so many other places in the world. And those individuals in the Indian subcontinent extend their influence all the way to the Uyghurs in Western China. You've heard of the Uyghurs, right? So you're talking somewhere between a third to half of the entire population of the world has now coalesced into one super organization called AQIS. Now, do you think that they knew that when they announced the new old Afghanistan policy, which is to bring the Taliban to the negotiating table? Do you really believe that the Taliban are going to come to the negotiating table when they just formed an alliance with about 250 different Salafi jihadi groups all the way from Afghanistan clear to Myanmar? Not likely. Whoever stands in their way is a target. It doesn't, you just fill in the blank wherever they are. And that word in Arabic is fitna. Fitna. When I do this, if I put my hand out in front of you and I keep you from advancing any further, in other words, if I exercise my sovereignty and I want to control my border, I am causing what is known in the Islamic world as fitna, oppression. And that is a catalyst. Whenever you put your hand out in front of the global Islamic movement, it catalyzes a response based in the Quran of two verbs, qatl and kharaj. Qatl means to slaughter and kharaj means to push away. They occur 4 times more frequently in the Quran than the verb jihad, which occurs about 40 times. Qatl and kharaj occur about 180 times, and their dimensions more violent than anything you ever imagined about jihad. And that is catalyzed by opposition. That's why you see indiscriminate slaughter whenever Muslim groups advance into new territories, because the people have the audacity to stand up for their own sovereignty. Therefore, they're going to be vindictively killed and have their faces literally rubbed into the ground in order to subdue them so that they will never rise up against the authority of Sharia law. That's the way it works. And if it's Hindus or if it's any other group, the strategy and tactics haven't changed in 1,400 years. And now we come to the heart of the matter. Just in case you weren't really sure what AQIS was really intending to accomplish, they were kind enough to publish in pretty well written English their manifesto. It's 20 pages long, and it tells you exactly what they intend to accomplish as a new global level Al-Qaeda. And the first 2 items on the list are to target Americans and Israelis globally, and then to subvert the countries that I mentioned to you already and expand the caliphate to a global level. They are very plain about what they intend to do, and they provide all of the Quranic foundational ideological references right in this 20-page document called the Code of Conduct. We have come to a new era, friends. Whatever you knew before is going to be obsolete. Looking forward, you can expect an entire new game, an entire new nature of the threat that we're facing, and we're walking right into it if we don't take this to heart. Osama bin Laden did the same thing in 1998. He declared global jihad on the Americans and the Zionists. He warned us what he intended to do 3 years before 9/11 happened. Why am I telling you this? Is this scary? Okay, but would you rather know it or not know it? Okay, now that you know it, what foundation, what personal ideological foundation are you going to stand on in order to not be overwhelmed or paralyzed by fear or anger? The Constitution. Now we're coming full circle to what I started with. Sovereignty. The right for us to stand up for the liberties that we were endowed by our Creator, who was kind enough to give men the gift to be able to put it into words in a document called the Constitution, which is simply a discussion of the sovereign rights that the Lord endowed us with. And now we have come to the challenge of our time. It's not about jihad. It's not about terrorism. It's not really about Antifa. It's not really about the progressive left or any of the rest of it per se, because those are all tactics. What is the strategy? To undermine our sovereignty, to replace, to alter or abolish, as the Declaration says, the current form of government and replace it with one which they consider to be more suitable. To alter or abolish. You can take the words right out of the Declaration of Independence. It tells you. So, any questions? Oh, yeah. I have my books here, so they're over there. I think, are we going to have questions and answers or no?
I'm not as young as you are, so I can't move as good. You know, so. Okay, we're going to do Q&A like normal. We'll line up over here. Bev will have the mic, and Jim and Philip will take your questions. They'll be together up here. What's your book? Okay. If you want to line up and buy books and not worry about talking to Phil or Jim while they're up here, then you can do that, certainly. Kathy will sell the books to you. Otherwise, let me get the mic and we'll start.
Okay, if people are leaving, if you could do it in a very quiet way so that those who are remaining be able to hear the questions and the answers. Jim, I never ask a question, but I'm going to take the first question.
All right.
Okay, the first question is, Antonio Gutierrez, the former Prime Minister of Portugal, is currently the head of the UN, the Secretary General. Could you please tell us what he did previously to running the entire UN?
Antonio Gutierrez, up until last year, the end of last year, was the he was the UN High Commissioner for Refugees. He was also, he's also a socialist. He was a member of the Socialist International. He, I went to a forum where he was talking, and he talked about how stupid it was that anybody could possibly think that terrorists would come up through the Mediterranean along with the huge Syrian diaspora that was going into Europe. He thought that was just really stupid. And then that was in the beginning of October. In the end of October, 9 terrorists, or however many there were, attacked and murdered hundreds of French citizens, tortured and murdered hundreds of French citizens. 2 of them that came up with the refugee flow. 4 originally were coming up that way. 2 got caught. But the other 2 were part of the refugees, part of the group that committed that terrorism, and they had Syrian passports. Now, they were probably phony Syrian passports because ISIS has a passport producing facility, and so you can't tell, really where they were from, but they certainly intimated that they were from there, and they came up. That was the important part. They came up through the refugee program, through the refugee mass coming north. And of course, that's a good reason because it establishes complete anonymity. And the FBI director had just said that people were going to do that, and he was standing there calling people stupid. And I was so tempted to say, how could you be so stupid? Don't you know that ISIS controls a number of those routes, and they make some of their money that way by charging people for passage? And why wouldn't they slide terrorists in with those groups? And now we see the consequences throughout Europe. Half of the people, not half, but a lot of the people that are in Germany, throughout Europe, that came up that way are doing a lot of damage. So he's a clown. I have those last 2, and that's it. I'm sorry. I ordered books, and they didn't get here on time. They're coming to Cincinnati tomorrow. So I've got 2 more, but I'll tell you what, if you want to pay me and give me your name and address, I will ship them to you at no extra cost.
The reason I asked you that question was that, okay, and we'll get books. We'll get more of Jim's books for next meeting. Many people here already own your book because it's one that we carry monthly. They would just like to own it with your signature. That makes it really formal.
Well, same thing. If you send $10 or give me $10 and then give me your address, I'll send it to you signed.
Okay. The reason I asked you about Gutierrez was we now have the head of the UN.
Yeah, he's the head of the UN now.
Being the person who was the face of all of this forced refugee resettlement. It's not part of the UN. It's the top of the UN.
Yes.
So,
Yep.
okay.
Thank you.
Our next question, Mary.
Yes, we have a candidate running in Stowe who's very far left, and she's been to a group called Indivisible. Do you know anything about
Oh,
this
yeah.
group? Could you tell me about it? And the other issue we have is our Stowe Century is very leftist, and they used to print my letters. They won't print them anymore. And what I would really like to do is put out some flyers, but I don't want to get sued, and we really need legal advice and help to protect us because, you know, it's very expensive when you have a lawsuit.
Well, you know, I'm the last person to ask. I mean, my feeling about lawyers is 500 at the bottom of the sea is a good start. But no, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
Will
I'm
you be
kidding.
sleeping
There are some
outside
good lawyers.
tonight?
There are some good lawyers. I happen to know some. In fact, some are in this room.
Yes, some are putting you up, actually.
So I better be quiet. Shh, I didn't say that. You didn't hear me say that. But yeah, they're putting up with me. Yeah, that's true. But you're not going to get sued. I don't think you're going to get sued. But Indivisible is a group. They wrote a book, a handbook on how to protest. A lot of them are former Obama administration officials. And Indivisible, the booklet that you can download as a PDF has, you know, really caught on. And I don't know how many hundreds of thousands or whatever it is that they've downloaded, but it's become kind of a thing. And so Indivisible has become kind of a thing. But they're all just part and parcel of this mass resistance that is Antifa, the Revolutionary Communist Party, Workers' World Party, all of them. They're all the same. They're all the same. They're a bunch of extreme radical leftists that are trying to create chaos to take this country down. But they are former Obama administration officials, so that should tell you, if you don't already know, more about the Obama administration than anybody wants.
All right. This is a very important guy. He owns a newspaper locally, and he's one of us.
Oh, wow.
His name is Joe.
A threatened species.
Well, not really. But I a question for you.
Yeah.
You know, you and Phil have enlightened this entire group. What connection do you have with the White House in educating Donald Trump with this information?
I can't say. No,
I mean,
well,
obviously-
honestly, no. We know some people who work in the White House. We've been to some staff meetings. I can't really say too much, but primarily, you know, there are people. Everybody knows what's going on. Okay, and Trump is learning what's going on. And what I was trying to show in my presentation is that, you know, he's really not stupid, that he's trying to do things and he's being careful. He's trying to do things in an atmosphere where literally the entire town is against him. And 99.9% of the bureaucracy is against him. In the Justice Department, you know, we criticized, we thought Jeff Sessions was really going to go to town. Well, he has in some regards. I mean, he's unshackled all of the border agencies, and we discovered, oh, what a big surprise. The border agencies really want to do their job, and they're going after illegal aliens like, you know, like dogs going after a tennis ball or something. I mean, they are really fighting, and they are really doing their job now. And so the numbers of illegal aliens coming across the border are plummeting. The numbers being arrested internally are going up. And that all discourages border crossers. It discourages border crossers who come claiming to be asylum seekers, which most of them aren't. It discourages border crossers that come in hoping to be part of the Cuban Haitian entrant program. Border crossers in so many different categories, in addition to the refugee resettlement program, that are now very discouraged because people are, the law enforcement is laws are being enforced. Jeff Sessions is doing that by himself with the help of maybe 2 or 3 staff members that are loyal to him.
And you know what?
Everybody else in the entire Justice Department, they won't write memos, or if they do, they'll write them opposing to what he wants. You know, if he wants a legal opinion on what he can do about this, that, or the other thing, they write this massive legal opinion saying, no, we disagree with that. He can't get people to help him. So he's working by himself with a couple of other people running that entire program. And they still need to replace lots of the, USAs, the U.S. attorneys that are in the field offices. They fired a bunch of them. I don't know that they fired all of them, but they fired a bunch of them. Now they need to replace them. They've only replaced it, I think, 50 or so. I don't know how many there are total, but they haven't replaced anywhere near the amount they need to. And so in the meantime, those are taken over by assistant attorneys who are all lefties. They're all part of the permanent bureaucracy. 99% are left-wing. Many of them are extreme left-wing. I'd say, in fact, I know a lot of them are communists.
You know, what you said about Tillerson is very troubling. I mean,
I
very
didn't
troubling
say it,
indeed.
he said it, but he knows
What
more
Phil
about it than
said.
I do, but
Unbelievable.
yeah. But yeah, well, it's troubling what he's doing. It is.
Hi, Jim.
Yeah.
My name is Matthew Ewer, and I'm a third-year college student, and there's no mention of the truths about Islam in any of my classes.
Of course not.
Yeah, I'm in a controversial religion class, and he says Islam is a religion of peace. Right.
That's what they say.
So you know,
Okay.
I'll try to mention something every once in a while. It's
Mm-hmm.
like an open debate class, and you'll say, all right, let's try not to get into an Islamophobia kind of movement. So what I'm getting at is, what can we do to inform college students what's really going on? Because the longer we wait, the more people get brainwashed by professors at these universities.
Well, you know, a big thing. Yeah, well, it's just true. Well, the trouble is, that's a good, yeah, very good question. The trouble is the university culture, of course, and that's something that's only going to be reformed over a long period of time. We could start, the federal government could start by defunding those universities that don't practice diversity in their hiring programs. That's one thing. We as individuals can vote with our feet and not allow our students to attend universities that don't allow diversity of hiring in their of their professors and diversity of courses, as in not all radical left propaganda. Some courses that actually teach students what they went there to learn. There's a few very good colleges that remain true to their mission. Send your kids there. Don't send them to any of these other schools. We need to vote with our feet. We need to vote with our money. And that's the best way to get their attention. In terms of what we can do right now, very little. You should, if you haven't, you should go to David Horowitz Freedom Center and look at their, they have a whole program for colleges where he really tries to take on that whole attitude in colleges. Hillsdale, yes, Hillsdale is very good. Grove City is very good. Claremont, I'm not sure. I think it's still pretty good. There's Grove City. Yeah, PA. Yeah, there's a bunch.
Matt,
Nat,
any handouts that you get here that you would like copies of to take to your class, you bring them to my attention and you will have them. Okay.
and you know, the other thing that I've found, Matt, is that you really disarm people when you give them just facts. You know, you don't have to say, I mean, it's obvious to me, it's prima facie evidence that, well, there's a lot of Muslims that are peaceful, but let's face it, the people that are committing terrorist acts in this country and around the world, they're not Methodists. I'm sorry. They're not Catholics. They're not even
Jews.
Jesuits.
They're
know?
not Jews either.
They're not Jews. Thank you. They're Muslims, and but I think you get more. You disarm them when you just bring facts. Like my book is just facts, lots of numbers that talk about what it costs, lots of numbers about what these people bring to communities. And these are things that they can't argue against. So they change the subject. And I know because I've seen how they change the subject in the propaganda that they've been putting out since I've been going around doing these kind of lectures.
Okay, our next person.
I just have a question. There's a movement going around to have a constitutional convention.
Mm-hmm.
Are
Yeah.
you aware of that?
Yeah.
And who's really behind that? And how dangerous would this be?
Well, I don't know. There's a lot of opinions about that. Mark Levin is a big proponent for that. In my mind, if you have a culture in DC that doesn't respect the rule of law, what does it matter if you change the law? You know, what does it matter if you amend the Constitution if they're giving the middle finger to the Constitution as it stands? That's my thing. And then there's always, in my mind, the possibility that the convention gets taken over by the radical left, and then they skew it to do something that they could have never done before. And they're much more organized than we are. And as I said earlier in my presentation, they have billions of dollars to play with, and they can mobilize armies of paid volunteers. I love that. Obama came up with some gems of phrases. They paid volunteers. Isn't that wonderful? And I'd like to be a paid volunteer, frankly. I don't get paid even when I'm paid for sometimes. But anyway, so yeah, I don't think it's a good idea. I'm not, rabidly against it, but those are the reasons that I think it's going to be ineffective at best. And that's where I stand.
Just wondering if either you or Mr. Haney had any updated information on the Debbie Wasserman Schultz affair.
I don't know what updated means.
I think she's asking, are they looking into those Muslim
Oh yeah,
IT people? Is there any investigation going forward that's active? I think that's Carol's question, yes? Yes. Because our congresswoman, the woman who I ran against,
Yeah.
was the second highest payee of that group.
Wonderful.
And Carol lives in the district, so.
Yeah. No, I don't know the answer to that, honestly. I don't know. I haven't followed it closely enough to give you a confident answer. Phil would be more likely to.
Okay, hold on. We have the seated expert here.
Yes, if you look, Congress had what is called an informal briefing about 2 weeks back on the IT scandal in the House. Louis Gohmert, Steve King from Iowa, Jim Jordan, and a couple other congressmen had 3 experts, subject matter experts, including Tom Fitton from Judicial Watch, and a reporter from the Daily Caller, and an IT specialist that worked on the Hill for 13 years. It's on YouTube. You can go query it. It's the IT hearings on the Pakistani IT scandal on the Hill, and it's about 2 hours long, and you'll hear all the most recent facts and figures on the status of the case, and they intend to continue going forward with it in the future. So that's the most recent. There's a lot of information that they brought out. These are ad hoc committees that don't require the permission of a chairman to do. And so they intend to do some other kinds of informal briefings in the months and weeks ahead. So that's the most recent movement on that case. You can find it on YouTube.
It's one of our young people here who comes along.
Well, this is a two-parter. I'll first go with the easy part, and the next one is more of like a revelation about what happened in Rocky River. My first thing is that what can us as a whole, the people that do have this information, can do. Like, I was thinking of something like, like Anonymous, they like really like exploded all this information. I think we need to play dirty, and we need to get this stuff out and open, like really like strong. I think this is what we need to do, because this is a new era. I mean, I know there's a lot of elderly people here, but I know. And I have to tell you something, not that long, I'm going to be your age. So, maybe.
I resemble that, Mark.
But I'm 34. I'm giving away my age. I'm 34. So what can we do to really make it like stick to the people, even people that just are offended by our beliefs? What can we do?
I got you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming. And you're a spring chicken, I'll tell you. Well, I went through a list of a lot of things we can do, and I'm going to stick with that list. Everybody asks what we can do, but what they really want to hear is the magic pill. They want to hear one answer that they can go out and do tomorrow or next week. They want to know one place where they can go and slam their fist down and express whatever it is they are. There isn't a magic pill. There is not a magic pill. Everything that we're doing is going to take time. And my presentation, I tried to indicate how things are going in DC, and there's reason for cautious optimism, but we are facing a very big mountain, very late in the game, with very few resources. Our biggest liability is that we don't have the media. So we need to exploit the media that we do have, and that's Facebook, and that's Twitter, and that's the internet. But I would say do not abandon a traditional media like local newspapers. Write letters to your local newspaper, and if they don't publish it, call them up and ask why. Call them up and say, listen, you are publishing these clowns every day of the week. Why not publish my letter? And if you harass them enough, they'll do it. So it's not easy. See, it's not easy, and it's not something we can do once or twice. It's something we have to persist in, something we have to steel ourselves to do, because it forces us to go outside of our zone of comfortability and really get active. We need to change the culture. We need to change the political situation, and we can do that locally. The local politics is a cesspool of corruption. We need to elect local people who will clean things up and do the job that they're supposed to be doing, because really all across the country they don't, and the reason is because nobody's paid attention. Nobody's paid attention, and it just becomes routine.
Okay, and my second parter is that I know a lot of facts about the Rocky River girl, and the Rocky River Tiani, and I cannot reveal some information I know, but it's more heartbreaking than you think it is, and that's all I gotta say.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Hi, I guess I'm in a good place here following her comments. I feel that I don't know if you've thought about this, when you're trying to decide your policies of moving forward, and I know you're moving forward on many fronts, but I feel like it's time for something very large too. And I feel like America should just stop, catch its breath, stop almost all immigration, and have a discussion as an American family for a generation, 15 or 20 years. And
I
then
agree.
there is so much to talk about and so much to learn and understand. So I don't know if something, the people that are sympathetic to this could get together and come out as a group and say, this is what we recommend. If you ask for a generation, you might get 10 years. And also American citizenship, I don't know how many years it is, but that could be extended too. Is it 3 years or 5 years?
Well, for refugees, it's
7
5.
years? Make it 20. Ask for 20. This is such a privilege to be in this country, and nobody pays much attention anymore. It's not being taught about in school. Families aren't paying attention. It will take that long for them to really absorb it and to appreciate the privilege of being a citizen.
Well, I agree. The annual, we allow 1 million people a year to become legal permanent residents. It's 1 million people a year. And 85% are family reunification. Only 15% are employment related. They talk about how important it is to open our borders to bring in people to do jobs that supposedly Americans won't do, although I don't even buy that argument. But it's only 15% of that 1 million a year. The rest are family reunification. And so Trump is doing a lot to try to slow that whole thing down, but I agree 100%. We should pause our entire immigration program. It's the 1968 Immigration and Nationalities Act, or 1965, written largely by Ted Kennedy's staff, which created this monster that we have today, along with the Refugee Act, which was also written by Ted Kennedy and Joe Biden while he still had a brain. And those are destructive, deliberately premeditated, destructive pieces of legislation designed to bring in people from all over the world that will become new Democrats, but will not assimilate to this nation. And those laws need to be, in my mind, they need to be abolished. The trouble is getting a quorum or even 10 or 20 members of Congress that will stick their necks out and agree with you. That's the problem. So that notion, and we started really, we made a statement when we elected Donald Trump this year, and it was a statement that was very powerful. It was powerful in that we said, we don't like where things are going, and we are going to do something really surprising to make a statement about that. And in DC, they've begun to take notice, and the more we win, the more they're going to take notice. The more they take notice, the more we will feel emboldened to say more things that push more things that we want. It's not going to be easy, but right now, you couldn't get 10 members of Congress to support a proposal like that, even though I think it's, what we absolutely have to do. We have to absolutely get a control of our immigration program, both legal and illegal.
Hi, I know the problem with the people in the State Department and the Justice Department, that Obama pretty much made them all civil service employees, and that's why it's hard to fire them. Couldn't Trump just undo that?
Well, yes and no. It's interesting. One thing that I'm waiting for somebody to propose is a reformation of the civil service laws, because the civil service laws have become so convoluted and so obstructionist that, there was a guy in the EPA that was at home for 3 years, not coming to work at all, watching pornography every day on his computer, and receiving a check. And they didn't fire him. I mean, come on. And so this is the kind of problems you face. And I saw it when I worked in the government. I saw that we had a secretary. She was just a doll. I loved her, but she was dumb as a post. And she couldn't do half the work. She could answer the phone, and that was about it. And my boss tried to get her fired. And oh my God, the whole place, she was black, unfortunately. And so, of course, the whole place went up in arms, calling him a racist and everything else. And all he wanted to do was replace her with somebody who was competent. And this is the Office of Management and Budget, the White House Budget Office, which should hire good people. And the people that it hires to be the analysts are people, except for me, who are the cream of the crop in the, I was kind of a rabble-rouser, but the rest were, really people from Harvard and other places like that, smart people, not necessarily wise people, excuse me, but we needed good people, and she was not good people, but we couldn't fire her. So that's the kind of situation you face, but we have majorities in the House, the Senate, the presidency. That is one thing that I have said repeatedly, and I've said this to people who can hear it, that we need to reform our civil service laws. We need to abolish public employee unions because they foment corruption. They foment a symbiotic relationship between politicians and the union, which the politicians support the union supports the politician, and it's all on tax dollars. And so that's why what Walker did in Wisconsin was incredibly good, but it was also incredibly brave because you saw what the reaction was. They went nuts. But those are the kind of things that we need to do, and then we can start firing those employees. But in the meantime, we could transfer them, and that's one thing that they haven't done anything of. I wish they would do that. Send all those DOJ recalcitrant lawyers to count penguins in, Antarctic or something.
I want to thank you,
You can, yes.
and I feel privileged to be here this evening.
Thank you. So do I.
In answer to the question about what we can do, I think it's really up to the young people. I think that the reason I've been feeling out of place for years and years and years because I feel that there's no one to talk to. I find myself being more ostracized, having less friends, because I do speak up.
Yep.
And sometimes I feel like I'm banging my head against the wall, and all I'm getting is a headache, because I'm not making any headway. I'm not making any progress. There's no one that I can convince. And if it's not up to the young people to get them involved in this thing, I think, I'm sorry to say, to put a damper on this whole evening, because I thank you, because I finally feel as though I'm liberated, and I don't feel that I'm crazy. But if it's not for the young people, I think the old people are beyond changing their mind. And I've been trying for years, and they all think I'm an oddball. They think that I don't know what I'm talking about. And it's a very disheartening and a very lonely place to be.
I know all about it.
So,
But I'll tell you something. Let me tell you something. Because both my children are that way. They've been raised in public school, and the public schools have, if you say something like, transgenderism is a maladjustment, they'll go nuts. You can't talk about things. I keep talking about things anyway, and they know I love them, and they love me. My hope is that like me, when they grow up, it will start percolating down, it will start filtering in. My older daughter goes to Overland. Oh my gosh. And I didn't want it. But my ex-wife she was very much in favor of it, and she appealed to her daughter and got her to go. But my daughter's a smart girl, and she's an open-minded girl, and she'll come around. May take a while.
Do you think we have enough time? Time is of the essence. We're dealing with lunatics. We're dealing with people that are in a very big hurry.
We may not, and that's why I say, and have always said, and continue to say, and will continue to say, pray, because we need supernatural intervention. We need it. Oh.
You must recognize it's wonderful.
I know this lady. She's a doll. She's
Thank
a
you.
doll.
On one of your slides that's titled, I think, Hate America Tactics.
Yeah.
At the bottom, you had Saul Alinsky.
Right.
I asked Lisa Watson. She was our keynote speaker at an OLC event at the end of September. She is a former member of the ACLU board, went to New York and everything, so she'd seen the light. And after our events, I said, tell me, what kind of books do you suggest? Or what you know, what's the left reading? And she said, well, you know, Saul Alinsky,
Rules
that's
for
old.
radicals, yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
But that's kind of old.
Oh.
And I wondered if you, and in the book she suggested was right away. I mean, she right away said, don't think of an elephant, George Lakoff. Are you familiar with that?
Never heard of it.
He wrote that in about 2004, and I'm currently listening to it on CDs.
Huh.
But in that short piece, he mentions moral politics, and she referenced that this is what the left is following. It's about framing the issue.
That's what I said right at the beginning.
And since it's from 2004, there's a lot of reference to George W. Bush,
Right, sure.
weapons of mass destruction and all that
right.
sort of thing. So anyway, you might add that to your list of reading.
Yeah, I will. In fact, send me an email about that because I want to get that and I'll forget. I would like to get that. I'd like to read it. Yeah, no, that's really true. And it is. They frame the narrative along the lines of compassion, social justice, equity, fairness. So if you oppose whatever it is, you're automatically against social justice, you're automatically against equity, so therefore you're a hater, you're a bigot, you're a racist. That's all there is, and that's the entire narrative, and that's what they have been trying to establish about America since 1917, and now Antifa and those other radicals go out into the street with the pretext that we are all what they have been trying to say we are for 100 years. And of course, they're totally wrong, but that doesn't stop them. It's never stopped the left before. All they need is a pretext. They could care less if they're right or wrong.
Jim, this is going to be the last question of the night. This has been asked to me by many people over the last year. The role of the Council on Foreign Relations, the hold that they have over our elected officials in both parties.
Well, I have not studied the CFR very closely, nor have I studied the Trilateral Commission or the Bilderbergs. A lot of that, I think, for a career politician is a resume stuffer. You know, Republicans like to say that they're members of the CFR because it means they're part of the inside crowd and they may be somewhat acceptable to the inside crowd. In terms of what it actually does in terms of policy, I don't know. I don't think it does that much, frankly. I could be wrong about that, but I don't think it does. Just like I think the Bilderbergs is a private meeting where you can learn about the stuff that these world globalists are planning for us. And if you're an insider you can find out all the horrible kinds of ideas they have floating around. But I don't think it's any, like global conspiracy kind of a thing. I think that more comes from the Communist Party, comes from our enemies overseas who have agents here who are agents of influence, like George Soros. It comes from organizations. A good one is the Institute for Policy Studies, organizations that try to develop narratives. That's their big thing, is developing narratives. Developing narratives that then justify policies. And the narratives are crap, the policies are crap. But once they establish them and have done all of the background, think tank research and have a bunch of papers with a lot of footnotes and guys with PhDs at the end of their names having written them, then they can come and say, oh, well, we need to do this or we need to do that. It's all just towards their ultimate goal of imposing socialism in this country. But I don't think the CFR particularly has that much sway, but I could be wrong. They might. They probably do. Oh, well, there you go. Now that's the left for you.
All right. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you November 27th. Thank you.